They sent a crew with a big yellow backhoe to tear down my lake cabin for not paying HOA fees. The only problem being, I'm not even in their HOA. The whole thing, the entire twisted saga, it felt like being targeted by a movie villain. But a villain in a polo shirt and a suburban mini-kingdom. What they didn't know was that while they were rolling up with their demolition crew, my kids were already on their way, and my entire family are federal agents. The mist over Lake Sterling that morning was just how I liked it. Cool and quiet, hanging low over the water like a soft gray blanket. Just a perfect start to the day. I took my first sip of coffee, the good stuff I grind myself, and felt the warmth spread through my hands. At 68, these little routines, they're what keep the world turning straight. Out on the dock, the old wood was damp under my slippers, and the only sound was the gentle lapping of water against the pilings. This was my piece of the world. My wife, Elaine, and I, we built this cabin with our own 2 hands, right down to the little boathouse at the end of this dock. It wasn't just wood and nails. It was 30 years of memories soaked into the grain. I was halfway through my coffee when I saw it. Something bright orange tacked to the boathouse door. It looked angry against the calm gray morning. I walked closer, my stomach tightening just a little. It wasn't taped, no. It was nailed. A single thick-headed nail driven right into the wood Elaine and I had painted together a decade ago. That felt wrong. It was a violation before I even knew what it was. I pulled the nail out, leaving a small, ugly hole. The paper was some kind of official notice. The header read Maple Creek Estates Homeowners Association. That was the first alarm bell. My property line stops a full half-mile from their manicured little kingdom. Below the heading, in big, bold letters, it said, Final Notice, Unpaid HOA Dues, Demolition Scheduled. The amount due was listed as $11,740.26. So specific, so official-looking. But the worst part was at the bottom. Deadline, 3 days. My first thought wasn't anger, it was just confusion. This had to be a mistake. A clerical error. I went back inside and dialed the number for the HOA secretary. A woman answered on the second ring, her voice smooth and sugary like she was selling something. Maple Creek Estates, this is Veronica. How can I help you? I explained who I was and the notice I'd found. I was polite. Ma'am, I believe there's been a mix-up. My property isn't part of your association. She made a little tut-tutting sound. Oh, Mr. Peterson, yes, I see your file right here. It looks like you're quite a bit behind on your dues. She spoke as if I were a child who'd forgotten his homework. I held my ground. There are no dues because I'm not a member. The county plat map shows my property line is outside your jurisdiction. She sighed, a long practiced sound of fake patience. Well, our records here show that your parcel was annexed 6 weeks ago following a community vote. I'm sure you received the paperwork. She said she'd flag it as a potential clerical mix-up and that it would be all fixed before any crew is scheduled to arrive. Her words were meant to calm me down, but they did the opposite. Something about the way she said community vote and annexed felt rehearsed and slippery. The next morning, the mist was gone, replaced by a hard, bright sun. I was making my coffee when I heard it. A low rumble of a heavy engine and the crunch of tires on my gravel driveway. I walked to the front window and my heart sank. Parked right where my driveway meets the little access road was a big dual-axle flatbed truck. On it sat a backhoe, its hydraulic arm folded up like a sleeping insect. A man in a hard hat hopped out, holding a clipboard. He grunted, pointing a thick finger at my cabin. Hank Peterson? I said I was. I'm Frank, the foreman with Kruger Demolition. We've got a work order here to take down that boathouse. And if the site isn't cleared, we start on the main cabin. I stood there stunned. There's a mistake. I called yesterday. The HOA secretary said she was handling it. Frank, the foreman, finally looked at me, his eyes tired. Mister, I don't know anything about that. All I know is we've got orders. The order says we either get a certified check for 12 grand or we take it down. The foreman's words hung in the air, heavier than the diesel fumes from his truck. This was real. The sugary voice on the phone was a lie, and the proof was a 10-ton piece of machinery sitting in my driveway, ready to turn my life into splinters. Arguing with him was pointless. I just said, all right, let me make a phone call. I turned without waiting for a reply, walked back inside, and locked the deadbolt. My hands were trembling slightly. I dialed my oldest, Lisa. She picked up on the first ring, her voice crisp and clear. "Dad, you okay?" I explained everything. The orange notice, the phone call with Veronica, and now the backhoe parked 20 feet from my porch. I tried to keep my voice even, but she could hear the strain. When I was done, there was a short, sharp silence on her end. When she spoke again, her tone had changed. It was the voice she used when she wasn't just my daughter anymore. It was the voice of Special Agent Peterson. "Dad, listen to me carefully. Do not go back outside. Do not talk to the foreman. Don't say another word to them. Go to every window and take a picture with your phone. Get the truck. Get the backhoe. Get the license plate on both. Then go to your file cabinet. Find the deed to the property and the last property tax bill you paid. Take a clear picture of every single page, every one. Do you understand?" I did. This was a script, a procedure. I was a retired electrician. I understood following a checklist. "Yes," I said. "Good," she replied. "Email them to me right now. Then get in your car and drive to the county clerk's office. Be polite, be calm. Ask for a certified copy of the official plat map for your parcel. Don't just look at it. Get the certified copy. That piece of paper is your shield. I love you, Dad. Now do it." The call couldn't have lasted more than 3 minutes, but it had changed everything. Fear was being replaced by a cold, methodical focus. I had a mission. I drove to the county building. At the records counter, I asked for the plat map for my parcel. The clerk typed it in and swiveled the monitor toward me. On the screen was a map. I saw my little square of land right beside the lake, and I saw the heavy black line that marked the boundary of the Maple Creek Estates HOA. And I saw that my property was completely, indisputably, outside of it. A wave of relief washed over me. It was the truth, right there in black and white on a government computer. The clerk printed it, stamped it with a heavy, satisfying clunk, and the seal she pressed into the corner made it official. This wasn't just a piece of paper anymore. It was evidence. I was driving back home with the certified map on the passenger seat like a trophy when my phone rang. It was Lisa. "Okay, I've got something," she said, and her voice was grim. "Dad, this isn't a mistake. It's a target." She explained she'd run a background check on Veronica Stone. This isn't her first rodeo. Over the last 5 years, she has filed altered property maps in 2 other counties. She finds a property she wants, usually one with water access that's adjacent to an HOA she controls. Then a new, slightly different map gets filed with the county, one where the boundary line has mysteriously moved. 6 weeks ago, she filed an altered map for your area. That's the community vote she was talking about. She forged it. My hands gripped the steering wheel. The sugary voice on the phone now sounded sinister in my memory. The polite secretary wasn't just mistaken. She was a predator. As I pulled into my driveway, the demolition truck was gone. But then I saw him. A man in a polo shirt with the Maple Creek Estates logo was standing on the road, holding a camera with a long telephoto lens, and it was pointed directly at my living room window. He was taking pictures, documenting violations from a distance. They weren't gone. They were just getting started. A few minutes later, 2 black sedans pulled into my driveway. My boys, Jake got out of the first one, a big man who moved silently. A silent perimeter check that was second nature to him. The second car held Leo, my youngest, with a postal inspector's restless curiosity. "Don't worry, Dad," he said with a small, confident grin. "Mail fraud. Wire fraud? This Veronica lady is stepping in it big time." My old oak kitchen table, the one where they'd done their homework as kids, was suddenly a command center. It was time to go to war. The next morning, the fight came to my front door again, but this time it wasn't quiet. A tremendous bang and the screech of tortured metal jolted me out of bed. A massive truck had left a 30-yard dumpster. Dropped squarely at the end of my driveway, completely blocking it. It was a cage. My kids were already up, drawn by the noise. Jake stood at the window, his face a stony mask. "They're trying to box you in, Dad," he said, his voice flat. "Make you feel helpless." But I wasn't helpless. I was documenting. I picked up my phone and started my system. Notes app, date, time, and what happened. Photos with a timestamp. My how-to guide for fighting back. Leo looked at a hand-delivered notice, tapped the name at the bottom, Richard Ritchie Thorne, HOA treasurer. "All right," Leo said, a sly grin spreading across his face. "Let's see if Mr. Thorne wants to talk about his debris." He wasn't Leo Peterson, U.S. Postal Inspector. He was just a concerned son. The phone was answered by a gruff, sleepy voice. "You pay the fine, it gets sorted out. Simple." It was Richie Thorne, and he sounded exactly like a man who enjoyed his petty power. "We just want this to stop," Leo said, putting a little desperation in his voice. "We're thinking he should just sell the place and move." The line went quiet for a beat. When Richie spoke again, his voice was dripping with smug satisfaction. He thought he was winning. "Well, now, that's the smartest thing I've heard all day. We'll make it so he wants to sell. It'll be a lot cheaper for him in the long run." Leo's eyes met mine across the kitchen table. He had him. A direct admission of their strategy. "That's extortion," Lisa said without looking up from her laptop. "Combined with the mail and wire fraud, that's a federal case. But they weren't done yet. They had a plan. A week later, after a formal complaint with the State Attorney General's office and a FOIA request, the documents arrived in a large digital file. Lisa spent a full day piecing it all together, and then she let out a long, slow whistle. She had found it. The HOA's financial records showed a recurring expense category labeled General Contracting and Site Management with no receipts. Just a lump sum paid out every quarter. The recipient? Stone & Sons Contracting. The sole proprietor? Veronica Stone's brother. The bogus fines she charged people like me weren't just for power. They were to cover the holes in the budget left by the money she was funneling to her own family. The evidence was now overwhelming. The next day, I had to run into town for a few supplies. Just a normal Saturday errand. I was gone for maybe 2 hours. I heard it before I saw it. As I turned onto my road, a sick feeling crawled up my spine. Where my boathouse had stood for 30 years, there was now just a pile of splintered wood and broken dreams. They had moved with stunning speed, a brutal, efficient act of destruction while I was away. The foreman, Frank, and his crew were just finishing the job. He wouldn't look at me. He just packed up his tools and motioned for his crew to get in the truck. My neighbor, Bill, came running down the road. "Tom, I'm so sorry." "We called the sheriff as soon as we saw them, but they were done in no time." He looked devastated for me. "And Tom, there's something else," he said, his voice low. "After the big crew left, another truck came. A pickup. Veronica's nephew. He loaded up all the good lumber. The old-growth cedar. Said it was salvage. They hadn't just destroyed my property. They had looted it. For the first time since this all began, the fight went out of me. They had finally hit me where I lived. I just sat there on the splintered edge of the dock, in the empty space where 30 years of my life had been. My fingers found something smooth tucked in a crack. A small, faded photograph that must have been tacked to a wall inside. It was a picture of Elaine and me taken the summer we finished building it. Covered in sawdust, smiling at the camera. I was so proud. Looking at her smiling face in that photo and then looking at the pile of wreckage, something inside me finally broke. It wasn't loud. It was a quiet, heavy collapse. The fight was gone. They had won. My kids found me sitting there. They didn't offer empty comforts. They didn't say, "It's okay, Dad." They knew it wasn't. After a while, Jake spoke, his voice low and hard. "That's it. The defensive posture is over. We stop reacting. We start acting." I looked up at him. Then at Lisa and Leo. I saw the same look in all their eyes. They had made this personal. They had hurt their father. They had declared war on the wrong family. The next morning, I went to the hardware store and bought a dozen 2x4s and a sheet of plywood. Just enough to make it look like I was starting to rebuild. I stacked the wood neatly on the dock, right where the old boathouse used to be. The stage was set. I spent the afternoon drawing up a set of decoy plans for a new and improved boathouse and left them spread out on my workbench in the garage, clearly visible through the window. It was an invitation for a nosy HOA president to come snooping. While I set the bait, Jake went to work. He had 4 small motion-activated cameras, no bigger than a golf ball. He hid the first one inside a birdhouse, its tiny lens peeking out of the entrance hole. Another one under the eave of the garage aimed directly at the window. A third he tucked into a thick hedge bush. And the last one inside the cabin looking out the back window. All we had to do now was wait. On the third day, Jake's phone pinged. The image on the screen made my blood run cold. It was Veronica Stone. She had parked her car up on the main road and was walking down my driveway. Bold as you please. She walked right out onto my dock, inspecting the wood like she had every right in the world to be there. After a moment, she turned and headed for the garage. Her eyes zeroed in on the window exactly as Jake had predicted. She leaned in, trying to get a better look at the decoy plans on my workbench. She was trespassing. We had her. Just as she raised her phone to take a picture through my garage window, I heard it, the sound of tires on gravel. It wasn't one car, it was two. Two black SUVs, the kind that don't have hubcaps, rolled silently down my driveway and came to a stop, perfectly blocking her exit. The trap was sprung. Veronica was so focused on my garage window that she didn't hear the SUVs until they were already stopped. The quiet crunch of gravel under their heavy tires made her spin around. The smug, proprietary look on her face dissolved like sugar in hot coffee. It was replaced by a flicker of confusion which quickly curdled into alarm. The doors of the lead SUV opened and 3 people stepped out. They wore dark suits, their movements economical and precise. They were federal agents. Lisa stepped out of the passenger side of the second SUV. Veronica's face suddenly flooded with indignant red. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, her voice a little too high. "This is private property. You are trespassing." Lisa didn't answer her. She just walked calmly toward Veronica and pulled out her credentials. She didn't flash them. She just held them open for Veronica to see. "Veronica Stone," she said, and her voice was now stripped of any warmth, becoming the official voice of the United States government. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." My daughter read a bully her rights on the very dock her victim had built, on the spot where the evidence of her crime lay in a pile of splintered wood. All the bluster, all the sugary condescension, it all just drained away, leaving behind a hollowed-out woman who finally understood she had pushed the wrong person. The crisp, metallic click as the handcuffs closed around Veronica's wrists was the loudest sound in the world. The case that followed wasn't complicated. The prosecution laid it all out. The altered plat maps, the forged votes with signatures from people who had been dead for years, the fraudulent notices delivered by hand to avoid mail fraud charges, a trick that my postal inspector's son Leo explained to the court with professional clarity. Lisa's team had recovered emails from Veronica's computers. There was one she had sent to Richie Thorne after I first called her office. It read, "The old man on the lake called. He knows the deed. Stall him. We need to make him sell before he figures it out. Don't worry about the law. We are the law here." That one email sealed her fate. They also had the HOA's financial records, showing thousands in unaccounted funds paid directly to her brother's phantom contracting company, and they had our camera footage. Crystal clear video of her trespassing on my property to further her campaign of harassment. She had built a cage of fake rules for others, and we had simply used the real laws to lock her inside it. The judge was a no-nonsense woman who had seen her share of HOA tyrants. She didn't just find Veronica guilty, she made an example of her. She ordered Veronica to pay me a significant sum in personal damages for the harassment and emotional distress. She ordered the full and complete reconstruction of my boathouse to be paid for out of Veronica's personal assets, not the HOA's funds. And the final beautiful blow, she ordered the Maple Creek Estates HOA board immediately dissolved. Its charter was revoked, and it was placed under the independent administration of a court-appointed receiver. Her power was gone. Her money was gone. Her kingdom was gone. The best part of the whole thing was the county commissioners meeting a month later. Spurred on by the case, they voted unanimously to pass a new ordinance. All HOAs in the county would now be subject to mandatory independent financial audits every 2 years. My fight had protected not just my own property, but potentially hundreds of others. The next Saturday, a different kind of truck pulled into my driveway. It was a lumber truck filled with beautiful new cedar planks, the kind that smells like hope. My neighbors, Bill and Cheryl, and the others who had stood with me, showed up with tool belts and coffee. We spent the weekend rebuilding the boathouse. We weren't just putting up walls. We were rebuilding a community based on respect, not rules written by a bully. As I drove the last nail into the new roof, standing in the same spot where I'd stood with Elaine all those years ago, I looked out over the quiet water. The mist was hanging low over the lake again. Just how I liked it. You can't fake your way out of the truth. It will always eventually come out into the open, and that's the end of my story. Or at least the end of this chapter. It's a good one, with a happy ending, but it leaves me with a question I can't shake. We got our justice, but it wasn't the kind a normal person could get. We won because my kids had the resources, the training, the connections, the kind of power that normal folks don't have. So I have to wonder, did we win because justice prevailed, or because we were the only ones who could afford to fight back? And what about the ones who can't? What happens to them? Drop a comment below. Tell me what you think. Is a community better off with strict rules or with trust? And where do you draw the line between a community leader and a bully?